Good morning. My name is Sister Joan Brinks. I'm a member of the Pastoral Care Team here at Mount St. Francis Center. We welcome all of you who have gathered here in Clare House Chapel, especially Sister Bev's family, those watching on the in-house system, as well as Sister Bev's family and friends who are joining us via live stream. We gather to honor and remember Sister Beverly Eichler. Please join in our opening song, Lift Up Your Hearts, number 568. 568, verses 1 and 2. Our opening song speaks of God's enduring love that Sister Bev experienced throughout her life. She lifted her heart in praise of God's love by gracing others with her warmth, her welcoming smile, and her presence. Bev grew up on a farm near Pocahontas, Iowa. There, she learned from her father and mother what it meant to be faithful and faith-filled, and what it entailed to completely trust in God. Her fifth grade teacher, Sister Catherine, nurtured that faith and planted the seed of her vocation. That inspiration led her to seek membership with this Franciscan community, who at that time primarily ministered in education, and thereupon she joyfully dedicated her life to teaching and administration. How appropriate that Bev died on the first day of summer, the longest day of the year, in which we experience the abundance of sun. Like the sun that is faithfully present, Bev was attentive and generous in sharing her gifts of kindness, gentleness, acceptance of others, and a good sense of humor. We pray in gratitude for God's enduring love and for the gift of Sister Bev as she lives on in our hearts.
A reading from Psalm 128, taken from Psalms for Praying by Nancy Merrill. Blessed are you who reverence the beloved, who walk in love's way. You radiate an inner joy and peace wherever you go. Compassion draws you to the gates of those in need. Families and friends gather upon your doorstep. Children run to greet you with open arms. Yes, blessed are you who reverence the beloved. Strangers feel at home in your presence. The oppressed are comforted by your support. Blessed indeed are you who reverence the beloved. Peace is within you.
Now is our time to share memories of Sister Bev. Please raise your hand and we will bring a microphone to you. Please state your name and stand if you feel comfortable.
Sister Rita Getkin. I lived with Bev 4 years in Eugene, Oregon. And in those years and in all the years since, I just remember her so much as being a thoroughly good person shown in the best of ways. And that is in ordinary, everyday life, with her generosity, with her speaking well of others, with her being faithful and always there. I also think of her as somebody who knew how to keep up with every blessed baseball, basketball, and football team simultaneously. I remember one Saturday afternoon talking to her, and she was crocheting. She was an avid crocheter. At the same time, she was listening to one game through her earphones. She was watching another game on TV, and she knew what was going on. She could tell you how far they were, who was winning, and she was conversing with me. 4 things at the same time.
I'm Aunt Bev's nephew, Hal Lunsford, and this is my wife, Betsy Houchins. Before I get to my story, though, I'd like to just express my gratitude and thank you all for loving my aunt. My biggest fear, my wife and I were in Spain for the last 2 weeks, and we had to cut our trip short to be here. And my biggest fear was that my aunt was going to die alone. You guys proved me wrong. Yesterday when Aunt Bev passed, her room was full of you guys, and I was forever grateful, and I just felt the love of this place, and so thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Michelle for helping me a lot, and Sister Bertha, but also I want to thank my dear Sally, Rita, and Edith for sharing wonderful stories about Aunt Bev, and so I'm forever grateful, so thank you. My story with Aunt Bev is and I've shared some of the videos with some of you guys, was with regards to our son. Our son was a gymnast, still is. And his junior year in high school, we wanted to bring Aunt Bev out and watch Christian at the state meet. He qualified for state, so I drove out Thursday evening. I drove out, we drove back right away. He participated on Friday, he qualified for the finals. And so during his event, my wife was videotaping Christian doing his the reins, and he did an awesome job. But when he was done with his routine, I'm very passionate about my son, so I'm yelling and screaming and just carrying on. And my wife zoomed back onto me, was screaming, and then all of a sudden she went right to Aunt Bev, and Aunt Bev had her ugly cry going on. I mean, she knew how to have a good cry. And so I'm forever grateful for that video, where we got to bring her out and spend a wonderful weekend with our son and our family, and watch him be very successful with gymnastics. But just that video alone was just heartwarming for me. But thanks again for everything, everybody.
I'm Sister Lois Erpelding, and I was in a sharing group with Bev. But what caught me the other day was a framed picture in her room, which I think says it all. It's God speaking through Scripture. God says, "You are unique." God says, "You are special." God says, "You are lovely." God says, "You are precious." God says, "You are strong." God says, "You are cherished." Thank you, Bev, for being all of these.
Sister Camilla Heeman. Probably a lot of you have heard this story because I know I heard Bev tell it many times. But she talks about when she was a little girl, she always told her dad she wanted a pony. And when Hal's mother was going to be born, Bev was taken away to her grandmother or her aunt or somebody for this to happen. And her dad took her there, and he said to her, "When you come home, there will be a surprise for you." She knew when she came home there'd be a pony. It was a little sister instead, and she said, "I never got the pony."
I'm Sister Rita Green, and many years ago, when Bev and I were in college yet, we were in a science class, and we were assigned to do a project. So we decided to do one together, and we thought about it a lot, and finally we decided to do one on the solar system. So we got to work, and we started making the planets and so on. We made them out of paper mache. Can you imagine the mess we had? After they were all made, we painted them. And then we decided we'd make a mobile out of it. So here we were making this mobile, trying to get it balanced and everything. And you know, way back in those days, we had to pack our trunks before we left mission in the spring, so that in case we were moved, we would have all of our possessions with us. So from a couple years after that mobile project, every time we get to mission, we'd open our trunks, and there we would find one of the planets. And we decided that's the way good friends show their love for each other.
I'm Liz Donahue, and I first met Bev at Mary the Woods. And we taught kindergarten and first grade together. Well, anyway, we had to watch the playground, and we were very suspicious of the lady who lived next to the playground because she would steal all our balls, and we never got a ball back. And then one day, somebody came out of her house and stole one of the bikes of our kids. So we thought, this is enough, we have to do something. And so we called the police. The police came and took Bev into the house where the guy had come out of. And in the house was a whole house full of druggies. It was a drug house, and we didn't know it, and it really surprised us. And we really watched that house after that. We watched everybody that went in and out. Then I met Bev later when she brought Lucy to Stone Hill. And Lucy was the life of the party. She was a great, great gal. That's Hal's mother. So Lucy, I was in the activity department, so I'd always call on Lucy to help me when we were having activities. And she could make them really spin. So I want to announce that the big shrine in front of Stone Hill is from Bev's family, St. Francis and all the flowers and all, because Lucy was really loved as well as Bev. They were known as a team down there because they were both small and they could get into everything.
Sister Edwardine Ferking, I became real acquainted with Bev when she moved to St. Francis House and served as sacristan. I will always remember and with pleasure think about the years that I worked together with Bev in that job as sacristan.
I am Sister Sally Mitchell, and I am a second cousin to Beverly, and I always was. She and I, starting with fourth grade, and she in fourth and I in third, went all the way through Sacred Heart School of Pocahontas. And then when she went to the convent, I had already thought, we talked about it several times, and she went first because she was older. So I waited, and I would visit her that year when her parents came, and so on. And I knew the family very well. We used to celebrate years ago in the church the 9 Fridays before First Friday, the first Fridays of every month. So on Thursday night of those first Fridays, Bev stayed at the Mitchell house. Well, my sister and I shared a bed. So when Bev was there, all three of us shared a bed. And when I went out to her house, she had a younger sister, Lucy, too, and they shared a bed. So when I was visiting at their house, the only thing I didn't like about visiting at their house was the lack of facilities. And I didn't really like going out to that little outhouse, but we had to do that sometimes. So then at her house, there were also 3 in a bed. So I have enjoyed so many memories with Bev. I could go on and on with that. And she and I went to Ireland after my mother died and left money for us to go. And it was a wonderful trip. So we have enjoyed our Irish heritage together, and we have enjoyed our friendship and history together.
Sister Rita Green again. I'm going to pick up on what you said, Rita, about sports. We all know that Bev really was in sports. When we still lived over on 2 South in Francis House, we used to attend the Cubs and the Bulls games especially, via TV of course. But Sister Bev, Janine McDermott, and myself used to phone back and forth during the games. And we would comment on home runs and spectacular catches and so on. Anyway, We stayed in our own rooms because, as you said, she was usually knitting or crocheting, and Janine was making cards and I was crocheting. And so we would listen to the games. Well, when we moved over to Clara House, we continued to do that, and we still did. And here, about a week ago, the last phone call I got was during the Cubs game with the Phillies. My last call from them.
Judy Sinwell. I met Bev when I heard that she was going to be leaving the West Coast, and so someone told me, as I was the principal at St. Ed's in Waterloo, that Bev might be interested in the position of doing special education for the children in the school who needed extra help. So I called her and we talked about it, and she did decide to take that position. And so just the things that have been discussed this morning or remembered of the personality she was at a school that was quite large, and she had this special position, but the staff, the family, everybody just appreciated and loved Bev. In fact, I let some of the St. Ed staff at that time know that she was in hospice last week, and got the message back that the parish really appreciated the energy of the sisters with the staff at that time. But the day I went to Sioux Falls to be with Sister Meg, Cheryl Waters stopped me in the corridor and said, "I have a card, I have something for you." And I had no idea what she'd be talking about, and so she came back with an envelope with my name on it, and she said, "A sister wrote this thinking you were a jubilarian this year. So this is a card for you for your jubilee." And when I found that out, I said to her, and I still didn't know who this was, but Cheryl said, I said to her, "Now you wrote this for Sister Judy, she's not a jubilarian. Do you want to keep it, that I would give it back to you and you would take care of her, or could we just give it to her?" And so the sister said, "Just give it to her." So I picked it up that day, probably about noon, and left immediately for Sioux Falls to be a companion sister with Meg. But I had that envelope. I didn't open it till about 5 days later. And that morning I read it. It was a wonderful Jubilee card, as she would write. And that very afternoon when I opened my email, there was the message about Bev's condition, and she had chosen to go into hospice. So I did have a chance last week on Saturday to stop in and see her in her room. And I reminded her again of the things that we have said, but the fact that she is still teaching, still mentoring this last moment of her, last days of her life, helping us all make honest, real choices about where we are and how to move into this space, the last part of the journey, with hope and trust and joy. And she knew who I was, and we could kiss each other and say thank you.
I'm Betsy Houchins, and I remember when my son Christian was young, and he was curious about relationships, who's this person, and so he treated Bev like another grandmother, of course, but then when he heard people call her sister, he was very confused because he knew that she had one sister, Lucy, but then other people would call her sister, and she was like a grandmother, but she wasn't a grandmother, and whose sister is she when all these women are around? So it took a while for him to understand relationships. And when my son was a senior in high school, he thought maybe he would want to go to the University of Illinois. So as soon as Bev found that out, she started knitting a blanket, University of Illinois, and he decided to go to Iowa. So So then she got started on another blanket, and he brought that blanket to college. I don't know where the Illinois blanket is, under the bed. It's the emergency one. So she has always been a part of our lives and like another grandmother to our son. So that has just been a wonderful relationship throughout the years.
I'm Carol Hemside. Are Fritz and Franny here? Fritz and Franny are, sounds like twins, it's a married couple. Fritz and Franny live in Ocean. Franny is the sister of Sister Gracia Schmidt. And when Gracia and Bev were extremely close, did lots of stuff together, great friends, because Franny moved into being aware of that relationship, and Fritz caught on. Fritz is my first cousin. This is just to underline how well Bev did relationships. Gracia is gone several years, but Fritz and Franny have never abandoned Sister Bev. In fact, this past Sunday, the pastoral staff was responsible to let Fritz and Franny know that she was moving into her last moments. If they didn't buzz all the way down here from Ocean, and Franny said to say our goodbyes, I just want to bring them to your attention too.
Thank you for sharing your special stories and remembrances of Sister Bev's life. We will continue to share our memories of her during the days and weeks to come. Let us pray. Divine light, Sister Bev longed in her heart for the deep love that only you could reveal to her. In trust, we believe that Bev has been healed, made whole, and received new life. We give thanks for her dedicated life of joyful and faithful service to all. Give us the strength to carry on her deep love of life and compassion for others. In joy and faith, we pray. Please join in our closing song, Lift Up Your Hearts, 568, verses 3 and 4.